I have had several requests to produce expert advisors that have a combination of conditions in them. And when I designed the framework, I intended for this to happen. So today we're actually going to build an expert advisor that combines two trend following strategies in order to determine confluence between those strategies. So for this tutorial, I'm actually going to create three separate strategies. The first is a simple strategy, so strategy one, and that just combines two indicators to determine a trend. In this case, I'm just going to be using a fast and a slow moving average. And what I'll be doing for strategy one, if the fast moving average is above the slow moving average, then I'll be in a buying mode. And if the fast moving average is below the slow moving average, I'll be in a selling mode. Then I'll have a second strategy, also a simple strategy. In this case, I'm going to be combining one indicator and a level. So this might be something like a MACD and a level number, or a stochastic. In my case, I'm going to use RSI. And my RSI strategy will be that if the RSI is above a specified buy level, then I'll be in a buying mode. And if the RSI is below a specified selling level, then I'm in a selling mode. And then the third strategy is the combination of the two. I'll be in a buying mode if both of the other strategies are in buying mode. I'll be in a selling mode if both of the other strategies are in a selling mode. And I'll exit trades if strategy one indicates an exit. I have the MetaTrader 4 editor open here, and I'm going to be using framework version 2.01. You can download this framework from Orchard Forex. I will leave a link to the download in the description below. We do update that download from time to time, so you might find that there is a more recent framework if you're downloading this at some time in the future. This should still work with later version frameworks. Our intent is to maintain that forward compatibility. In the extensions folder, which isn't a part of the framework, I have indicator classes which have been created in previous videos. There's the ATR, MA, and RSI. I will be using the MA and RSI classes today, and I will leave links in the description below to the videos for those, and I will also put the links on screen for those. I will also be creating three new signals classes. These will be for the two indicator signal, the one indicator signal, and then the combined signal. And then at the end of this, I will also create an expert advisor that uses all of these. I'm starting with the two indicator trend signal. I've created the file here already, signal trend 2 indicator, and I've created it as an empty file. When I was developing this originally, I actually created this file by taking a copy of the signal crossover class. So if you do have that signal crossover class, you might find it easier to copy that and make modifications. But for this video, I'm starting with an empty file and going through step by step. First, I need to include the framework. And that's a simple include statement. And because this file is located in the signals folder inside extensions, I'm using relative addressing going up 2 levels. So to extensions and then to frameworks, and then loading in the framework.mqh file. And this is explained in the videos on the framework, which I will link in the description as well. And next I set up the class. I'm calling this class C Signal Trend 2 Indicator, and it inherits from the C Signal base, which is also described in the framework information. I have no private variables. I do have one protected, which is an index, and this index will be used to determine which bar number I'm looking at when I run the strategy. And typically I'll be looking at bar number 1, which is the bar that's just closed. Most of my experts are written to trade on the close of a bar, so typically I'm using index number 1. Next I have the constructors for the class. The base class, C-Signal base, will default the values for symbol and time frame based on the current chart, but it is my habit to also include a constructor that allows you to specify the symbol and the time frame. And then the only other argument is the index, as I mentioned, and the second constructor just has the index and no symbol and time frame. So the first version constructor passes that symbol and time frame into the C-Signal base, and the second version calls the parent constructor with no arguments, and that will default to the symbol and time frame from the chart. And then also, as I normally do, I will call an init method rather than write code inside the constructors. So I'm calling the init method, passing in the index. And then I also have a destructor, but there is nothing to do in here, so I just have the open and close brackets. And then I've also declared the init method, which just takes the one argument of the index. And then I have one public method, and that is the update signal method. Update signal is already defined inside csignal base, and I'm overriding it here. So within csignal base, it does nothing and just returns. So I'm overriding that here because I have specific actions to take in the update signal. So the first method that I then create is the init method. This takes the single argument of the index. The first line here is checking to see if the parent class has passed the initialization. And again, you will see this described in the earlier videos on the framework. And if the parent has failed initialization, then I'll also fail initialization on this class. If the parent has succeeded, all I'm doing then is saving the index argument into the member variable index and then returning in it succeeded. Then the only other method that I need to write in this class is the update signal. So this should be called each time information has changed, so that the EA needs to update the signal to get refreshed information. Because I'm working on the closed bar, this needs to be called each time a bar closes and then before the information from this class is used. Now this is a two signal trend. So I have a fast and a slow value, the fast coming from indicator number 0. And these indicators are set by calls to the parent class, which you'll see when I write the expert advisor. But there are two, and they are numbered 0 and 1. So 0 is the fast indicator in this case, and number 1 is the slow indicator. I'm using the index to determine which bar number to get. So this will return, because I'm using moving averages in this example, this will return the moving average data for bar number 1 for the fast and the slow. You don't have to use moving averages. This class will work with any indicator that returns a single value. I'm just using moving averages because it's a nice simple way to describe what's happening here. So then all I'm saying, if the fast indicator is above the slow, then we're in an uptrend. And so my entry signal will be a buy entry signal, and the exit signal will be a sell. So indicating from this strategy that I should be buying if I'm in an uptrend and selling if I'm in, and closing the sell if I'm in an uptrend. And then just the opposite. If the fast indicator is below the slow indicator, I'm in a downtrend, and my entry signal then is for sells and the exit signal is for buys. And just in case they're equal, then my entry signal and exit signal are none. These enums are also described in the descriptions of the framework. All the rest of the work, the heavy lifting, is done inside the signal base and other classes that inherits from. Let me just compile to make sure I don't have any typing errors. And that's fine. So next we'll look at the one indicator signal trend, and this would be something like an oscillator where you're able to specify levels, and then the trend is if the value is above or below certain levels. And the first step, as before, is to include the framework. So next I will declare the class. So like the two indicator, it's inheriting from csignal base. I have no private variables. I still have an index because I need to know which bar number I'm going to be reading the data from. But then I've also specified here member variables for the buy level and the sell level. I'll be using an RSI in the example today, and I'm going to be saying I'll be buying when the RSI is above 60 and selling when it's below 40. Next, the constructors. And just as before, I have two constructors, one that accepts a symbol and a time frame, and the other that just accepts values. And my values are the by level, the cell level, and the index. I've placed the index at the end here because I'm actually setting a default value of the index to 1. So I'm placing that value at the end of the list. And then just as before, I call the C-signal base in one case with symbol and time frame, and in the other case with no arguments. And then calling the init method, passing that by level, cell level, and index. And then here is the declaration for the init method. Then I'll just finish that off with the update signal method. Just as before, I'm going to create an update signal method here that overrides the parent method because the update signal is generally specific to each of the signal classes. Then the init method. The same as for the toIndicator signal, but I'm passing in two extra variables and I'm just storing those in the member variables. And the update signal is also very similar. But in this case, instead of having a fast and a slow value, I just have one value, and I'm comparing that to the by level for an uptrend and the cell level for a downtrend. But I'm setting the entry signal and the exit signals just as before. Let's just see if that will compile. That does, so no problems there. And now, because I want to use both signals, the one indicator and the two indicator, I'm creating another signal class called signal combination in this case. And again, I've started with an empty file, so let's start filling that in. Including the framework. My class is called C-signal combination, and I'm inheriting from the signal base. I don't have any private variables. I do have a protected variable, and this is of type C-signal base. It's an array of pointers to C-signal base classes or to C-signal base objects, which I'm calling M signals. So I'm going to store a list of other signals in this class. Then my constructors, just like before, there's one that takes symbol and time frame and the other that does not, and I have no other arguments to the constructor for this class. So the second constructor is simply empty, calling C-signal base in both cases and calling the init method, although in this class you'll see there is nothing inside the init method. I just like to put that there so that it's easier to modify later if something changes. And then to round that out, I have the usual update signal, which is overriding the update signal from C-signal base, but I've now added another method called add signal, and I'll be using this to add in the two other signals to this class and populate this M signals array. So this add signal method just takes an argument of type C-signal base, or a pointer to an object of type C-signal base. And then the init method, and I probably misled you, it does do something, but not much. I'm simply setting the size of the M signals array to 0, which shouldn't be necessary on startup, but I'm doing that just to make sure. Then the add signal method. I'm simply finding the current size of the M signals array using the array size. I'm resizing that array then by 1 to size of index plus 1. But because index is the number of elements in the array and the positions of the array are 0 based, I can then simply refer to index as now being the last element in that array. And I'm just assigning signal, which is what was passed into the add signal. And then the update signal, and this is the more complex part of this class because we are combining the signals from the other classes. to go through all of this. First, again, I'm getting an index which is the size of the M signals array. This test, if index is less than or equal to 0, that simply means that no other signals have been assigned to this combination signal class, and in that case my entry and exit signals will be returned as none. But assuming that we do have some other signal classes assigned here, first thing I want to do is get the current signal state from the 0 element. So M signal 0, I'm calling the update method for that, and then the entry and exit signals for this combination class are being set to the values of the entry and exit signals from the 0 element of the M signals array. Then I'm simply looping through the rest of the elements. So beginning at number 1, because I've already picked up the values for element 0. So as long as I is less than the index or less than the number of elements, then I first update the signal for that element in the array, and then I get the entry signal and compare that to my current entry signal, and if they're not equal, then I'm saying that I've got one of these signals that doesn't agree with the others, and so I'm simply changing my M entry signal back to none. And then I do the same with the exit signal. So all of the signals must agree or I will return none. And I'm looking at the entry and exit signals differently. They don't all need to agree on both the entry and exit signals. You might want to code in something for that if you like. And I'm also not exiting this loop as soon as I get a disagreement, because I do want to call the update signal method on every element. So I just found it easier to continue the loop through, and there shouldn't be that many items in here. And then that just returns, and so at the end of this I've set the entry signal to be either a buy or sell as long as all of the other signals agree, or none if any one of them disagrees, and the same then for the exit signal. Let me check my compile again. If you are familiar with the framework, you will know that the framework uses a file here called all extensions to do the includes for indicators, signals, and other things. If I look at all extensions, you can see that it is including all indicators, all signals, and all of the take profit stop loss. We've just added 2 signals, and you can see that this file does not include those 2. But I do include a utility with the framework that you can use to rebuild all of these files. I'll just close them before I run that, so they don't have any conflicts with the editor. If I go to the frameworks folder, I'll right click that, open folder, and there is this make extension mqh.bat. If I run that, it searches through those folders and rebuilds the all indicators, all signals, take profit stop loss, all extensions. In fact, any folders that it finds in there, it will rebuild the mqh files for. I can close that, close that. I'll just click here and refresh. If we go into the extensions, then all extensions still includes everything, but all signals now has the combination and the trend 1 and trend 2. So just remember to run that make extensions before you go further. Now, to use these combination signals in an Expert Advisor, I've created a folder already called trend combination, and I've created a trend combination.mq4 for MetaTrader 4 and .mq5 for MetaTrader 5. I've got the MQ4 version open here. I will switch over when I have finished this to the MQ5 editor so that we can look at that. I just put in the comment lines here and then filled in the standard properties. If you've seen the earlier videos, I then have a complete Expert Advisor here under MQ4, and then I go on and explain that the Expert Advisor under MQ5 is identical, and I typically copy the code across. That's not what I would do normally in real life. I would normally have a third file which contains all of the common code, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing here today. And there, I've just included that trend combination, which is here, and we'll open that up next, and that will contain all of the code that is common between the MQ4 version and the MQ5 version, which you can see for the MQ4 version is everything, and there's very little difference in MQ5. All right, So here in the trend combination MQH, I just have the opening comment to begin with. I'm going to pull in the framework here, and this will be used for both the MQ4 and MQ5 versions. And because this is now inside the experts folder and there is no relative addressing back to the include, or there is, but I don't want to rely on it, I'm going to refer to them as Orchard Frameworks framework.mqh. Obviously, if you install the framework in a different location, you'll need to change this. Then I need some inputs. Now we have two indicators that I'm going to be using. One is the 2 indicator strategy and the other for the single indicator strategy. And as I mentioned, I'll be using moving averages for the 2 indicator strategy. So let's set up the inputs for the fast and the slow moving average. Nothing too exciting here. I'm going to default to a fast moving average of 10 periods and a slow of 20 periods, defaulting to the simple moving average and using the close price for both the fast and the slow. Then I need the inputs for the RSI, which I'll be using for the single indicator strategy. The RSI itself has only 2 inputs, the number of periods, which I'm defaulting to 14, and the applied price, which I'm setting as close. But then I'm saying I'm going to be in a buying trend if the RSI is above 60, and in a selling trend if it's below 40. Then just some standard inputs that I put in every expert advisor. The volume or lot size, which I always default to 0.01. The comment, which should be changed, but an easy way is just to enter the file name here, and then just a magic number that you would change for each of your EAs. And now, because we're using the framework, I need to create a variable for the expert. The framework already includes a class called CExpertBase. As I say here, use the child class name, but I have no need to create a child class for CExpertBase in this case. So I'm just going to define a name, CExpert, as CExpertBase. And the reason I do this definition is that other files may be simply referring to CExpert. And by doing that definition, I can then, as you see here, declare a variable of type CExpert. And then I'm just creating a member variable called expert. Then I need to bring in the 3 extension signals that we created earlier. The signal, trend, 2 indicator, 1 indicator, and combination. So my combination, I'm going to be using that for the entry signal. So I've actually declared the variable name as entry signal, and then I've simply called the 2 indicator as the trend 2 signal, typing mistake there, and the 1 indicator as the trend 1 signal. Then those signals will need indicators. So I'm creating 3 variables, one for the fast and the slow indicator for the moving average, and one for the RSI indicator. And these are of types C indicator MA and C indicator RSI, which were these indicator classes built in earlier videos, and there will be links for those. Then in the onInit section, first I'm going to create my expert variable, and that's a simple new CExpert because there are no arguments to pass to that. There are values the expert uses, but I typically create the expert with no arguments and then assign those values later, and I'll do that now. And these are the 3 standard values for the volume, comment, and magic number that we set in the inputs above. So next I'll create instances of the 3 indicator variables. and you'll need to see the videos on the other indicators to understand these better, but the moving average indicator takes the number of periods, the shift value, which I've never used, the method and the applied price. And the RSI indicator just has the RSI periods and the RSI applied price. So these three statements then will create the fast, slow, and RSI indicators. Then I'll set up the first two of the signals. Now I said I would be running this on change of bar, so I'm setting a simple variable here where I'm saying I'm looking at bar number 1. Then I'm creating my trend 1 signal. As usual, that's a new statement on the C signal trend 1 indicator. And this had 3 arguments, which were the buy level, the sell level, and the bar number. And then once I've created the trend 1 signal object, I add the indicator, which is the RSI indicator. Now, if you think back to this trend signal, there was nothing in that class that required this to be an RSI indicator. I could easily be passing in a MACD or a stochastic or anything else. So I've created the RSI indicator, and just like Lego blocks, I'm attaching the pieces that I want. So I'm putting the RSI indicator, and this 0 is the buffer number that I want the value from. RSI has only one buffer, so all values are coming from 0. And moving averages also only have one buffer, so I'll be passing in 0 buffer there as well. And then the same for the trend 2 signal. I create a new object. It only has one argument, which is the signal bar. And then I add first the fast indicator. Remember, inside this class, I referred to the fast as 0 and the slow as 1, so I'm adding them in the right order. Adding indicator fast first, and then the slow indicator, and then this will be number 0 and number 1 inside the trend 2 object. And now to pull all of that together, I create my entry signal object. This is a C signal combination, and then I just add the 2 signals. So first the trend 1 signal and then the trend 2 signal. It doesn't really matter which order I do these because they all have to have the same value. And now, just as I added indicators to the signals, I have to add those signals to the expert. So I'm saying that the entry signal for my expert is the entry signal variable, and the exit signal is the trend 2 signal. So I will be entering if everything is aligned, and I will exit if the MA shifts the other direction. And then we'll just finish that out. By calling the onInit method of the expert object, and then returning the result from that. Remember, at the moment we're inside an MQH, which is going to be included inside the trend combination MQ4. I need an onDinit because I've created a number of objects here and they should be cleaned up at the end. So I'm just killing any timers that might have been set and then deleting first the expert and then the 3 signals and then the 3 indicator objects. And then because I'm using the framework, there isn't much left to do inside the expert. The onTick, which typically processes the trades, is simply calling the onTick method inside the expert object, which is already built to handle the events passed from the indicators and the signals. And then for the other typical events, the same thing. Just calling the methods inside the expert for each of those. Now if I go back to the MQ4 and I'll just see if I can compile that, see if I've made mistakes. And that's compiled without errors. Now I'll switch across to the MT5 editor and do the same thing for the MQ5 version. Now I've opened up the MT5 editor and I have the trend combination.mq5 open. I've already filled everything in just to save time. Comments the same, but I've changed the name to MQ5. The properties are here, and I didn't mention earlier, but these properties, copyright, link, and version, are only loaded from the MQ5 or the MQ4. They won't be loaded from an MQH, so that's why I've left these in the MQ5 and MQ4. And then here, the same as the MT4 version, include trend combination.mqh, and that takes care of everything that is common. Then there are a number of event handlers in MQ5 that don't exist in MQ4. So there's the on-trade transaction, on-tester init, on-tester pass, on-tester dinit, and on-book event. I'm not doing anything with them yet, so if you look at the appropriate methods inside the expert class, you'll find that they're not performing any functions, but I leave them in here for completeness. I have had some comments in the past with people having trouble with this on tester init method. Let me point out, when I set this framework up, I simply used the wizard to create the MQ5 version of this, and it inserted this method. There are two versions of onTester init. There's this method that is void, and then there is also a method that is a type int and requires you to return a value. I've left this as void because so far I haven't had any need for onTester init, but if you are trying to use the int, then you should check the help files to find the appropriate values to return. But if you have no specific need of onTester init, I find that my tests have always worked using the old void method, and I won't be looking to change that until I have tutorials where I actually need to perform some functions in onTester init. So now let me just compile this trend combination MQ5 to make sure that that is working, and that has worked. So let's just quickly go to the charts and run these just to show that they are performing some trades. I have the MetaTrader 4 strategy tester open here. I've loaded the RSI indicator with the levels of 60 and 40 and two moving average, the blue fast line and the white slow line. Now, something I'll point out that I didn't mention when we were writing the code, I haven't built anything in to prevent multiple trade entries. This will simply trade every time the conditions are met. Adding the condition that there should only be one trade is yet another strategy condition that we could add later. So you may see multiple trades being entered here. I'll just speed this up a little until it makes some trades. Right, and there we can see the blue line is under the white line, so fast moving average is below the slow moving average, and the RSI is below 40. So both of them are indicating downward trends, and we've entered two sell trades here. I'll just change over to MT5 and show the same thing running there. And this is the MT5 strategy tester. Again, a blue fast moving average line, a white slow moving average, and the RSI. I'll just wait again for this to make some trades. I'll pause that. And there you can see the fast moving average has moved above the slow. So we're in an uptrend on the moving average strategy, and the RSI is above 60, which according to our definition is also an uptrend. So both of them are aligned, and it has executed a buy trade. So that's the end of this tutorial on creating a combination strategy using the EA framework. I hope you've found this useful. If you have, then please click the like button. And if you would like to see more of these videos, then click subscribe. And if you click the bell icon, then you'll be notified when we release new videos. So until next time, thank you for watching.